Welcome to the Success Story Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Clary. On this podcast, I have candid interviews with execs, celebrities, politicians, and other notable figures, all who have achieved success through both wins and losses, to learn more about their life, their ideas, and their insights. I sit down with leaders and mentors and unpack their story to help pass those lessons on to others through both experiences and tactical strategy for business professionals, entrepreneurs, and everyone in between. Without further ado, another episode of the Success Story Podcast. All right, thanks again for joining me. Today, I am sitting down with James Bostwick, who is one of the most respected medical malpractice and personal injury lawyers in the USA. He's the founder of Bostwick and Peterson. He's cultivated a reputation as a top-tier specialist in catastrophic malpractice cases and has secured numerous record-setting verdicts and settlements. Nationally recognized, Bostwick specializes in complex medical malpractice, birth injury, wrongful death claims, all these, these very difficult portions of law and legal that unfortunately we have to deal with day over day. He is a huge proponent of, I guess, championing for these individuals that don't have the proper representation. To note, one of the most impressive things he's done over his career, and that's what we're going to sort of get into over the course of this podcast. He was ultimately able to obtain a record-setting verdict for $21 million for a client. The story I'm going to let James tell it, but basically this is one of the largest verdicts to date for a malpractice suit, and that's what sort of led to his book, which is now a bestseller, Acts of Omission. And that's what I'd like to sort of dive into a little bit and speak about the case, the book, the current, the state of the current legal system in the States. All these things are all great topics, and we have an expert. So I'm glad to chat. But no, thanks for sitting down. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. So you want me to basically talk about my background and how I got to this point in my career?
I would love to, yeah, because I think that when you look at the resume that you have now, so you're an accomplished attorney. You've had some landmark cases. You're currently we're working on this book that's been highly successful based on something that's happened years ago that you've put out into the public. How do you get to this point in your career? What's your origin story? Where did you come from? Where did you find the passion for law, this particular type of law, and what sort of drove you to where you are today?
Well, many people that go into this have been interested in that their whole life. With me, it's very, very different. My father was a doctor, my mother a nurse. I loved medicine. I always wanted to be a doctor. And it wasn't until my senior year in the University of Washington that I realized that actually probably wasn't a good path for me, because I hated chemistry, for one thing. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So my friends were taking the LST, and I didn't even know what it was. So I went and took the exam, happened to get a good score, got into a school that was famous for having what they call a revolving door, Hastings, here in San Francisco. They would let anybody in, which is why I got in, I guess, and very few managed to make it all the way through. It was about a third. 650 of us started, and just over 200 of us graduated. And that's when I became a part of the law, and I fascinated. I loved it, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with the law. In fact, my thought was, well, I'll go and I'll get a master's degree in business, and I'll put the two together, and I'll do something, anything but to keep from having to go out and work, But I was putting myself through school, and I had lots of different kinds of jobs. So I sent out 150 letters to 150 law firms, and and I got a few back, and it just happened that a couple of them were from trial law firms, actually very famous, very well-known trial law firms. I didn't even know what a trial lawyer was. It had never occurred to me to do that, for that to be part of my life. But I went to work for one of them. Luckily for me, probably one of the best firms in the country that do this kind of work. And I just found I loved it. It was, I was a law clerk. I wasn't out of law school yet, but I went, I got a job with them, and I went right on to it. And immediately, because of my background and because of my love for medicine, I gravitated to those kinds of cases because it's a natural for me. So, I could speak the language. I knew enough about medicine. I understood it. So I started doing not only all different kinds of medical malpractice cases and other kinds of personal injury cases, but that became my niche. We had the whole cross section, but that became my niche. 10 years later, I was a partner there, but a few of us started to go off and decided to go off on our own, and off we went to start a law firm. Where I was really lucky was this was kind of an interesting story. Our senior partner, his name was Bruce Walkup, was probably one of the, if not the best trial lawyer, certainly one of the top 4 or 5 trial lawyers in the whole country. The first $1 million verdict, the first multi-million-dollar verdict, a very brilliant man, very good judgment, and a great mentor. And when we left the firm, Bruce, unlike fighting with us and having a big problem like many law firms did when they broke up, he was had a lot of common sense. He said, "You guys take all of your cases and just send me back 50% of the fee. You spend all the money on them. You take all the risk. If you win, send me 50%. Well, that gave us a whole body of cases to work on, and it gave him a bunch of money coming to him with the guys that are out there trying to make it in the world. That was very sensible. He said, "There's only one case I want you to leave here. Jim," he said, "I want you to leave that case that came in because of that huge verdict I got. And I want you to leave that little girl, Lori. She had been 13 when she became a quadriplegic from, we thought, possibly medical malpractice. She was, now 16 or 17. She was living in a nursing home. Her father had abandoned the family. Her brother was a ne'er-do-well. Her mother had MS, couldn't help her, so she was living in a nursing home at 16. And he said, "I want that case." And I said, "That couldn't be anything better for that little girl than you take that case, Bruce." A year later, he called me and he said, "Jim, would you take that Lori Eckershade case on the same basis of our prior deal?" I said, "Well, of course I would, but why?" And he said, "Because she calls me 2 or 3 times a week, and all she can talk about is you because you're like her big brother. Will you take it? I think it'd be good for her." So I got to work on this wonderful, huge case, which had a lot of problems, because it was radiotherapy. It was radiation therapy. It was the very new specialty in medicine. It was something that nobody had ever done before, really. No cases like it. There were only maybe a little over 100 doctors in the whole world that did that kind of work. So I think I talked to almost every damn one of them, trying to find an expert. I thought it was a case. I really knew it was a case, but I couldn't find any. They all knew each other. Mm-hmm. Finally, I found a guy in London who was called the grandfather of radiation therapy, who had retired, and it was in his late 80s, who said, "It is absolutely a case. I'll come and testify." I tried that case back in the 70s for 9 weeks. No offer. Well, they had a little offer, and they withdrew it during the trial. And the verdict was the largest medical malpractice verdict in the history of the country. It was on Walter Cronkite. It was, it was in newspapers all over the world. And that's what really, that interesting sequence of events is what really got my career going in this field. So then, after that, of course, we do lots of different kinds of cases, and I've had different permutations of my firm. But a later case that was quite interesting, which is the basis of the book you're talking about, and I'll tell you later why I wrote the book. But that was fascinating because I was still a young lawyer in the 80s, and it was barely hanging in there in practice, and this case came to me again with a person, and when I say quadriplegic, I mean a person that's paralyzed from the neck down. That's what this little girl was, and that's what this young man was, paralyzed from the neck down, from what we thought might be medical malpractice. But the problem is that it was maybe medical malpractice, but the lawyer that had handled the case had allowed the statute to run on that. So there was no way to bring that lawsuit against the doctors in the hospital. The lawsuit had to be against the lawyer. So you would have to prove not only the medical malpractice case, what they call a case within a case, that actually it was a good case and would have been successful had he done it right, but you also had to prove medical malpractice, legal malpractice, that the lawyer did something wrong. And the big problem, the case was that this was probably the most famous lawyer in the entire country. He was certainly beloved in San Francisco. He was in the papers virtually every day. The media loved him. The local bar loved him. The public loved him because he was very famous and always worth a great quote and quite a character. So I had to decide whether I wanted, and everybody said I shouldn't take the case. And I had to decide whether I wanted to take that case on against this famous guy and risk really my reputation, the firm, and my future in the legal trial practice world. I did it, and the case worked out well, but it was quite an interesting journey. That made a great, obviously because of those tensions, that made a great underlying skeleton of a fun novel. The novel, of course, is a highly fictionalized version of that, but that became the guts of the novel.
I love this story. Go ahead, sorry. No, go ahead. I have a question out of that, but I was gonna keep going. Finish the story, then I'll I guess my question is, you had a very early success, and obviously the success continued. Probably, I don't think that every success over the course of the career was like a record-breaking success, but there's a lot of successes. My question was, at what point do you want to branch out? And I guess you're probably going to segue into that with like, why did you want to write a book? Why was this something that, you felt the need to tell over the story? Because I'm sure there's a lot of cases that are just as emotional that aren't told over, which I think would make great stories, but we don't know about them. So I think that it's great that you've done it. Why? What was like your motivator? Was this, am I jumping into the story too soon, or I apologize if I am.
No, actually, that is exactly where I was going to go. Next was well, why write a novel? You're doing cases. You have people to represent. Lord, I'm busy. I'm still working, 150%. Not right at the moment because I'm working from home, like we all are. But I fly 180,000 miles a year. I'm a very busy trial lawyer. Why did I want to write a novel? And the answer is, well, I love reading. I mean, I'm nuts about reading. I love to read books. And because I read so much in my business life as a trial lawyer, I wanted to read, I read stuff that's, my wife calls junk. I don't agree with her. She once in a while turns me on to some actually good literature. But I like legal thrillers and stuff like that. I mean, I love that stuff. But I found it very frustrating over the years to read it, and because number one, it's all about criminal law mostly, which is fascinating, and I love that stuff and everything. But there are way more lawyers out there that are doing civil work. That the public, they need civil lawyers too. They need civil lawyers for their business disputes. They need civil lawyers to take care of their custody issues and divorces and estate issues and when they get injured. And there are lots of civil lawyers out there working their tails off, and there really aren't any books written about them. And maybe and it's actually can be as exciting. It can be just as nerve-wracking. And there can be a huge risk involved for both the parties and the lawyer, but nobody writes about it. And, well, with the exception occasionally of some very famous authors who like to make jokes about it and talk about the stereotypes, the ambulance chasing, which of course gets it's a typical stereotypical reaction. That's what all the civil lawyers are like. In reality, of course, there are lawyers like that, but very few. Very few. The huge majority of them out there taking big risks for clients that they've gotten, probably maybe too emotionally involved with, and are trying to do what they can for them. I wanted to tell that story. And the other thing that really bothered me about legal books and TV and movies is it's not realistic. Any lawyer that reads what's going on in a courtroom or reads what's happening and sees it on a movie, they shake their heads because it's just not what happens in real life. And real life can be just as interesting, but it's not authentic. And I thought, what, maybe can somebody write a book that is not only fun and has romance and has danger and has betrayal and has risk, has all those fun things, but also is very authentic, is actually what the law is really like, what lawyers really have to go through and what they think and what they worry about and where they, there isn't a lawyer that has done what I do that hasn't bet the farm at one point or another on some case where they're not sure what the result's going to be, but they just feel they owe it to the client.
Now,
and I wanted to write about that.
I think that's valid. I think that I think the reason why you're writing it out and building out, basically, every time you put stuff out into the world, like you build out your own brand, I appreciate the honest reason as to why you're putting this out. And I think it's important. As somebody who is a successful lawyer, are you looking to do more? Are you looking to create more content? Is this something that you'd want to take on, or is this just something that was like a really strong passion project that ended up, and we didn't even speak about, tell me some of the things you mentioned before, because I don't want to misquote, but the accolades, like this book it won an award. It's sold out of its first iteration, so now it's going to, I think, paperback. But walk through some of the things that it's won, and I guess, what do you want to do next with, now you're an author, which is a fun thing. What do you want to do next with it?
Well, it didn't win anything. It has been nominated for. I'm very, very honored that it has been nominated for the 2020 Harper Lee Legal Fiction Award. The Harper Lee Foundation is governed by the University of Alabama Law School, and I was, honored to have been nominated by the law school. Actually, the folks that administered the, I don't have any idea how they even saw the book or how they knew about it, but they nominated it for this award. In May, typically they pick 3 finalists, so pretty soon. And then usually in the summer, I don't know how that's going to work this year, but usually in the summer there's the finalist is announced. And so obviously I'm not planning on winning it, but it's a huge honor to have been nominated because that's one of the most prestigious awards, and it is the award for this genre, this legal fiction. So that's great. Yes, the hardbound book is completely sold out of the first edition. There are still some around in the bookstores that are all unfortunately shut down right now. But I think the publisher's completely out of them. They're gone. The hardbound is supposed to come out in July, I think the 9th. So it can be pre-ordered at this point. And there's an Audible, actually. The Audible is great. I read books, I'd never listened to an Audible before. And so the first Audible I ever listened to was mine, which was an interesting experience. And Roger Wayne is the narrator, and he's great. He's an actor, and he really got the characters, and he does different voices, and that's kind of fun. If you're the kind of person who has to drive long distances, Audible is a lot of fun. It's hard for you to have the time. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I love
wasn't me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's there's 300 or 400 reviews, and most all of them are 5-star, 4-star, and that's
it's doing really well. Like I don't know if this is the norm for somebody who's written the first book. I'm assuming not. I'm assuming that most people that write a book for the first time, and this is what I'm glad I clarified, because I actually wasn't sure if it was just a historical account of the trial that you won, or it was a fiction that was based on a lot of the facts that were presented, but it wasn't a true historical. So now I understand. It makes a lot more sense to me. But I don't think a lot of people have this much success. I'm looking at some of the reviews as we chat, and it's done really well for, in all seriousness, your first book. That's very impressive. Very, very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Because, I didn't think, I write for legal stuff. I write briefs and stuff like that. And what made me think I could write a novel? Well, I didn't. Actually, when I would complain about, books not being authentic, and my wife said, heck, stop complaining, write your own damn book.
Your wife
and
sounds
I said,
like she knows what's best for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And she said, well, I signed us up for a novel class. I said, what? Yeah. For your birthday, how to write your first novel over the age of 40. I signed us up. And so we did. We went, and it just kept going. And actually, I wrote, maybe 2/3 of it while my daughter was a baby, because we put her to bed early, we couldn't go out, and so I was writing at night, and became a habit, which it has to be for me. And then my second daughter was born, and she did not go to sleep. That was the end of the writing. So years later, I went back and said, well, that was stupid. Finish the damn book. And so I did. And I finished the book. And then, of course, that's when you're a, quote, writer, unquote, and there's a lot of people out there that will understand that thing, is then what do you do? Yeah. Then what? I had no idea what to do with this. I had about 500 pages in a computer. And along the way, I'd actually lost most of it, I thought. And luckily, a friend who I'd sent it to sent it back to me in a floppy. If you remember when they used to have floppy disks. that's and I was able to get going with it again. Yeah. So I just sat there. But a former client whose son was born with a birth injury. He was it was a medical malpractice case, and we became friends when I was handling his child's case. He came to the depositions. He got very involved in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens that he's a well-known movie producer in L.A. And he heard that I'd written the book, so he said, "Well, let me read it." I said, "Okay," and I sent it to him, kind of thinking, "Oh my God." Well, I didn't hear from him for 4 years, and I thought, "Oh my God, he hated it." Clearly, he hated it, and so he's just afraid to call me and tell me how bad it was. Then one day he called me a year or so ago, and he said, "Jim, I finally read the damn book. I love it." He said, "It's my favorite book and movie of all time." He said, "In the legal genre is is The Verdict."
Yeah.
And Paul Newman played in The Verdict. And he said, "This is like that. This is better, I think. I want to make a movie out of it." Well, wow. Okay, that's cool. He says, "Yeah, but then we can't make a movie out of it until it's been published." He helped me get a couple agents, and then that started the process, And it wasn't really until some very difficult and cutthroat editing, which I had to do, taking the book down from about 550 to about 450 pages, that it really, I think, became something that was readable, something that had the fat cut out of it, something that kept people going. And are there people that give me negative reviews? Yeah, that's wonderful out there. It's like, it's like a painting. Some people like the painting, some people think it's horrible. Writing a book is like that. It's a creative thing you put out there for the world. Some people love it. Other people, it's just not their thing.
But I'll tell you something though. You can't ever make content. You can't ever make anything that's suited for everyone. And if you are, then it's not great content. Yeah.
That's right. I think it's just fascinating sometimes when I see the negative reviews as all these great, things. It makes it real. It shows a cross section of people are actually out there reading it.
Yeah. That's what you want. So, but still, I don't know you didn't answer my question. Like, what's next? I'm curious because you have this book. You have to figure out you want to do another one, or is this like a one and done?
It's meant as a trilogy.
Okay. Okay.
It's meant as a trilogy, and I definitely have the plot line in my head, and I am working on the sequel. And the way I operate is that I have to I don't work from an outline. Some writers need an outline, and that works really well for them. When I'm writing, it starts just coming out of my head. It's wonderful, really. When the flow gets going. Yeah. I would find myself, if you've done any creative writing, I think when I'm in the shower, I'm suddenly thinking about, what's going to happen to this guy? What's going to happen next? And then I have to stop myself and say, wait a minute, he's not real. Yeah. You made him up. What is going to happen next is you're going to have him out of your head. They become a lot. They start doing things you never expected they'd do. That's when it becomes a fascinating project. And that's when they have a life of their own. And I think that's what gives them some real dimension to the reader, I think.
Agreed.
It's there. It's happening, and I'm working on it,
I love that. It's nice to see that you've done this successfully after a great career. I think that's a lesson for a lot of people listening, that it literally, don't be so, you can be laser focused on being successful in whatever you want to be successful in, but it doesn't mean that other things things that you may have not even realized, come into your life, and you can take them on, and it may be something like you meant. Like this, it seems like it was a very long project that finally came to fruition, and like now look at where it is, right? So that's a very good lesson for people that are listening. to be focused on what matters and be focused on your primary objective and whatnot, but also don't discount anything else, because I don't think that life ever ends up exactly. Look at what we're dealing with now. Life never ends up exactly what we think it's going to end up like. So the more open we are to different ways of growing ourselves professionally, of course you write a book, there's some money, that's great. Obviously, as a lifelong trial attorney, it's probably not to the same extent as like what you actually do for a living, but maybe one day it could be. These are all these different ways to sort of diversify. And I think that I mentioned this very briefly before we chatted, but what I wanted to pull out of this was, you've had your entire career, you started a book, it was successful. Not everyone, a lot of people right now are dealing with a lot of disruption in their lives. Their norm is just completely revoked. Like they've been fired, they've been let go, they've been furloughed. They can't complete their job, they can't make their money, they're stressed about feeding their family and whatnot, and all these things that are very important are now being sort of flipped on their head, and people have to figure out how to deal with it. Just know that you can go into something new and be successful. And this may, a lot of people are stressed out, but this would be a very good time, in my opinion, at least, to start to try and do things. And I think you're just like, you're living, breathing proof that there's literally no time in your life when you can't start something. So that's really I don't know what your opinion is, if you agree, disagree, but that's what I got out of it.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. This is one of those extraordinary moments in history. I mean, we are going through something that in our lifetimes we've not. I mean, I was born during the Second World War, but I don't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, was an extraordinary event. We've been through 9/11. Folks my vintage went through Vietnam and the incredible things that changed the country and changed thinking. This is at that level and perhaps way more. And I think that we have to refresh our thinking. I think we have to take what it's the bad things and look at how we change them, how we fix them, and where we go from here. I think as a country, our institutions, how we take care of the vulnerable in our society, what we do about folks that are homeless. We're having to address all that, and we're having to do it from home. We're having to do it. And that the same thing is in people's personal lives. I mean, I'm very lucky. And could my business completely collapse because of this crisis? Absolutely. I mean, we're like all businesses, unless they happen to be Amazon and they're delivering things to people. Or they're in the essential category where they're working twice as hard and putting themselves at risk. Most of us, our businesses they have the spigot cut off. I'm working more hours and longer days and 7 days a week, and I'm not really able to move my cases because for the first time, I think, in the history of the American judicial system, it is shut down.
Yeah.
And when I say shut down, I don't mean that there aren't some judges in there working with clerks from home, and the judges may be in the office and may be working from home, trying to do certain things that have to be done. But basic things that we need are not happening in the justice system. And the ultimate thing you need for criminal situations and for to where a defendant can find out are they guilty or are they going to be acquitted, or in a civil case, is the defendant going to be held responsible? Is the family going to be able to get some money to take care of their loved one and have a life for a change? That is all ground to a halt. That has never happened. And so those institutions need to look at that, but all of us that are sitting there thinking about, how did I get in this place, have an opportunity too, if we can look at it. And that's what I think you were saying. There's an opportunity to think out of the box. Keep an open mind. Think of other things you can do. Think of the other possibilities. I mean, obviously not everybody's not going to go out and write a novel. But there are so many other things that you need to be open to. And I think I'm not going to call it a wonderful opportunity, because there's nothing wonderful about what's going on. But I think it is an opportunity, which we should grab a hold of.
I agree. I want to, I'm just curious your insight, because you're living through it. What does justice look like today? What does a system look like today? How are we, because people don't stop committing crimes. People don't stop having to be put through, our justice system. But how do we do that remotely? That seems like an incredibly difficult task, and I don't know how we're doing it. I'm curious just to get your input.
Well, the fact is that we don't know how to deal with it. Where the courts are flailing, right from the Supreme Court of the United States down. Actually, the Supreme Court has decided they're going to have some hearings, and they're going to have them orally, and they're going to have them be public for the first time ever. And that's new. See, they're thinking there's a fresh thought there. Mm-hmm. All right, we have this problem. Let's approach it from a little bit different standpoint. That's transparency. That is a good thing. I mean, it's a bad thing that we have to have only oral arguments on the phone. It's a good thing that they're thinking about transparency. So right from the top, there's an opportunity for change. In courts all over the country, in every state, everybody's doing it differently. That's another problem, because we have, I'm in a state with all these different counties. One county has stopped all jury trials for 90 days. Another county has stopped all jury trials for 60 days. Another county has said, we're going to take everything on calendar and shove it down 90 days or 60 days, and we're going to move everybody as far out as the calendar goes so everybody remains in line. That's a sensible thing to do. The ones that just stopped the ones that were coming up, they're going to have a wave hit them whenever we can start getting back to some semblance of normal. And I use that word normal very advisedly. That is not going to be normal. I think that's what we don't want to admit to ourselves. It's not going to be the same, not for maybe a long time, possibly if ever. And the courts have to adjust to that, and they're starting to work on that. The lawyers are working to try to help the courts, and the courts are working to try to help the lawyers. And that's all good. That is a good synergy that is going to be, again, something good is going to come out of a very bad situation. But in the meantime, it's awful. There are actually less crimes, I hear, because people are home, they're not out. And so there are less crimes occurring, and people are sheltering, so they're not out doing bad things. And so in a weird way, that's a good thing. But there are still crimes. There are criminals that have been, and there may or may not be criminals. There are people that have been accused. Under the law, they have a right to a speedy trial. They have a right to be arraigned quickly. They had this happen and all that. Well, what did all defendants usually do? They waive that because they want, what is good? Delay. Someday down the line, get me bail. I'll face this. I'll face this tomorrow. I'll face this next year. What do they all do now? I refuse to waive time. I have a constitutional right to a speedy trial. You can't give it to me. You got to give up. It's a huge problem the courts are trying to deal with. When we do get back working, and we do get the courts actually grinding back into operation, what are, again, all of the courts the judge is going to have to deal with first? criminal cases. The civil cases they don't have the priority that the criminal cases do. So this mother who has a brain damaged child who has been working 24/7, night and day, working herself and her family to the bone to try to help this poor child, and who's been waiting 3-4 years for their trial date. Now I have to maybe have to wait another year or two. They may not be able to. They may not be able to manage. They may not be able to physically handle that. And that's just an example. Somebody that's dying of cancer, their case needs to be heard before they're gone. That may just not happen. There may be no way in hell that our case can be heard before they die.
And a lot of repercussions, a ton of repercussions that are.
Well, and I haven't even come to the biggest one, is that in the end, in our justice system, what is the denouement? What is the thing that decides everything? What it's the final exam where you get your grade. What is it?
Yeah.
It's the trial. It's where the jury says yay or nay, that the defendant is guilty or not. The plaintiff who is injured has a case or they don't. That's what juries do. How do we have a jury trial if people have to be at least 6 feet apart from each other and with masks on? How do I pick a jury if they have a mask on and I can't tell whether they're smiling at me or sneering?
Mm-hmm.
How do I pick a jury if we have to do it on TV? How does a jury make a jury decision if all the witnesses have been seen on TV like some movie or some TV show?
There's no emotion.
There's nothing. What is great about our system is it's up close and personal in a court.
Yeah.
It's people seeing each other sweat. It's seeing each other move and fidget. It's watching body language. It's that instinct, that smell that you get in a courtroom.
Yeah. When someone's lying or someone's, you get those feelings. You can read people.
Yes. And the best thing is when a jury, a lot of people want to stay out of jury service and all that, but if they actually go through it, usually they love it because it's a wonderful process. Because it's 12 totally different people coming together, using all their different views of life to make a sensible decision. And that combination, if it's done right, and if they have the right attitude, is fabulous. It's what made our system thousands of years of civilization. This is the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, but it's the best. How do they do that if they're interacting with each other on TV? I don't know. And maybe we can get back to normal, or maybe the new normal is something different than what we had. That really worries me.
Well, I'll tell you, regardless of what the new normal looks like, or if the normal is a more semblance of what it used to be, there's going to be lasting impact, even if minor, to a point where the justice system, well, it's not just justice system, I'm speaking about justice system because you're a lawyer, but every conversation I have is, what the industry, pick your industry, it's changed forever, basically. And there's no way around it.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, how do the restaurants come back and be the same? So many wonderful restaurants. Most restaurants are kind of on the edge anyway. How are they going to survive this? When they come back, if they have to have people sitting 6 feet apart, if the waiters are all got masks on and gloves, are people going to go out? Are they used to now ordering out now? Are they used to cooking at home, which is not a bad thing? What happened to that industry? Are we going to have hotels doing as well?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be traveling as much? There are going to be other viruses. Is this virus going to mutate, even if we can find a cure? And even if we can find a vaccine? Hell, we've had vaccines for flu for years, but they're rarely a vaccine that is, makes us bulletproof from the flu. If it mutates, we may face this, yet
There's also
again.
the psychological impact. It even I reference this a lot, but in Wuhan, where it was obviously ground zero, and now they're allowed to go back to restaurants and they're allowed to go, but nobody's going to restaurants. Nobody's going out. No, everyone's too afraid, and you don't know how long that's going to last for either.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, when I walk up on the mountain behind our house, Ring Mountain, I mean, people have masks on in the outdoors on a mountain. And people are walking off the path and standing out in the brush where the ticks are rather than be near somebody who's walking by them. Not everybody, but this is changing the world. We nod now, but we can't smile because we can't see the smile. The far-reaching impact of this is just beginning to dawn on all of us, I think.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mentioned this before, but I think that as this drags on, I would love to get your. Obviously, it's nice to speak about the book, and hopefully it does very well. But I would love to still get your ongoing insight as to how this justice system is coping, because that's something that I find very interesting as well. Personally, I find it very interesting. Just it's incredible the amount of disruption. But anyways, I digress.
No, I can tell you. I can tell you a little bit about that because we have folks that have been heads of major organizations in the bar.
Yeah.
Particularly those organizations that are from both sides, plaintiff and defense. Those organizations have been, we've been having ad hoc meetings and we've been coming up with guidelines that we can help and recommend to the court and help each other and recommend to the governors of the states and things like that. And they're in line with what we were talking about before. Look for a way to have this improve how we do things and get the courts more involved in streamlining the process. Get the courts more involved in making sure the cases move and how can the courts really help with that in a positive way? How can the lawyers help with that? How can they volunteer their time to sit in and act as special masters to help cases move, help make decisions on behalf of the court to the judges will be busy, and sit pro tem, because lawyers can be appointed by the court, take an oath and sit down and have the same power as any judge that was appointed or elected, because under the authority of most courts, they can sit pro tem and do that.
Yeah.
Experienced lawyers should all volunteer to do that to help the courts. And then the biggest problem they're going to have then is, are we going to have enough rooms to do the trials in? Bench trials, that shouldn't be a problem. Jury trials, I don't know. I've actually visualized, how do you see the jury? You don't put it in little plastic cocoons. That would be stifling and suffocating. It would be horrible. So maybe we put them in the back of the room where the gallery usually sits and spread them all out. And we as lawyers would be trying the case to the back of the room.
As opposed,
and the judge would be behind us, and the witness maybe sit up. We got to think fresh.
Yeah.
We got to think about how we can do this and have it still be safe, but it's to be a good system,
Agreed. Very good. I just have a couple sort of life lesson questions that you probably have some insight over your career that I like to ask. But before, is there anything else about the book that your career or our current legal landscape, sort of the topics that we've covered, that you wanted to speak about? Did we cover everything, or?
Oh no, I think we've hit a lot of all of it could be talked about in depth, but I think we've hit a lot of high points. Yeah.
Okay, good, very good. I appreciate that, and thank you. The one question I like to ask everyone is a lesson that you would tell your younger self across your career that would help you get to where you are a little bit quicker?
Oh, how would I get to where I am quicker? Yeah.
Or it doesn't have to be quicker. That's probably the wrong word, but just think of it as a lesson that you would tell yourself after your entire career that somebody who's listening could take and sort of implement right now, like some wise words, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would say to young lawyers and to young people that are starting out in any business context is that there is and I have mentored many young lawyers along the way, and my son is a lawyer with us, and I am mentoring him, which is a wonderful, lucky experience for me. And so what I think about, I think the most important salient thing I can say is, you don't have to approach your attack in the world in a competitive, adversarial way. You can accomplish as much or more, usually a lot more, by approaching things in a way that tries to bring people together in whatever's going on. Try not to become at odds with the person that you're dealing with. Who's your competitor, for one thing? And in our field, it's the guy on the other side, your adversary. In business, it's the people you're competing with to sell something, or there's lots of ways to go about things that don't involve knocking heads. And it takes young people a while to get that. And I think the sooner you get it, and the sooner you learn how to work around that and come back to how can we do this in a way that benefits both of us? How can we do this in a way that is not negative? There's so many aspects of business life and in all different walks of business life where that is an important concept that gets you so much farther down the road, and also makes you feel better and makes them feel better.
Very good. That's a good one. I haven't heard that one before, but it's very good.
Okay.
I have one more thing for you. I have one more thing. Where would you, or where do you go to learn and grow? Like, do you have a book, a podcast, an Audible? What's your go-to right now that you would suggest somebody go to read or learn?
I am.
It doesn't have to
like
be.
I
It doesn't
said,
have to be non-fictional. It can be. It can be a creative, fictional work. You mentioned you like legal fiction. There's something that has inspired you, and there's lessons that you could pull out of it.
Well, I do so much massive reading in the work I do that
That's fair.
that I don't have time, and that's a terrible shame because I lose out by not going to those places to do that. But where I go is I go to my colleagues. I go to other people I know and respect, and I talk with them, and I raise subjects, and I play the devil's advocate, and I listen to what they say, because in the end, many of the best ideas of the world are just a synthesis of previous ideas, other people's ideas. And if you put two or three good ideas together, then you get a wonderful new idea. And so that's my main source, always has been, in working on my trial law and my cases and how to do things, and working on business aspects and in my personal life, and how to deal with my children when they were adolescents, and all that kind of stuff. That's how I've done it. Just in terms of reading, in terms of reading, for fiction reading, I found a fellow by the name of Peter May, who's an English author, who wrote a great series, a trilogy about the Hebrides. I think he's a marvelous. It's a mystery whodunit, but he's a marvelous use of the language. And interestingly enough, I haven't read it yet, but he just republished a book about a pandemic in London, and I'm kind of looking forward to reading that because he's a very good author.
Very good. And if people want to, go find Acts of Omission, I'm sure they can go to Amazon, but any other places they can connect with you, reach out to you, social media, websites, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, we have Facebook and Instagram. We have all of that, and LinkedIn. It's in all those medias.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I am a technologic genius, of course. Being in my 70s, I don't know anything. I have wonderful young people that are teaching me about this. But
good.
Those are great places to go, and of course Amazon, and my son actually works for Amazon. He's in the HR department, and he's in Seattle, and been sheltering in place for longer than all of us. So they kind of started there.
Yeah, I'm just looking now. If you go to Amazon, if you type in James Bostwick, I know you go by Jim, but if you type in James Bostwick, I just Googled it. You have Amazon, you have Goodreads.com, you have Simon & Schuster, Post Hill Press, Audible.com. It's all there. So just, that's probably the best, easiest way for people to find it. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you. I appreciate the chat.
Thank you. It's been fun. Yeah, I've enjoyed it very much.
That's all for today. Thanks again for joining me on another episode of the Success Story Podcast. You can download or stream this podcast wherever podcasts are available, including iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and many others. You can also watch this podcast on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, and peers. Please leave us a rating on iTunes. It takes about 30 seconds, as it allows other people to find our podcast and lets our amazing guests reach even more people with their message. And remember, any rating is fine as long as it contains 5 stars. I'm Scott Clary from the Success Story Podcast, signing off.